I was 2 weeks behind on rent when I found the listing. A laminated flyer pinned to a community board between a mechanic's business card and a missing cat poster. Overnight concierge wanted, immediate start, housing provided, generous pay, discretion required. There was no phone number, just an address written in fading ink. It sounded like a scam, or maybe a drug front, but desperation does strange things to judgment. I memorized the address, snapped a photo for good measure, and found myself driving down a fog-covered mountain road later that afternoon. The directions took me out past the last gas station, down a winding forest trail that looked like it hadn't seen a snowplow in years, even though it was July. The hotel appeared just as the sun dipped behind the pines. It rose out of the woods like a monument to something long dead. 3 stories of stained stone and weather-warped balconies. Ivy had devoured much of the outer wall. The sign was missing letters. Van Crest H. Tell. No cars in the lot, no sound. Just an overwhelming sense that I was trespassing somewhere time had forgotten. I almost turned around. But then the front doors creaked open. A man in a red Bellhop uniform stepped out. He didn't say a word, just handed me a brass key with a leather fob that read 201 and nodded toward the lobby. "I'm here for the concierge job," I said, my voice uncomfortably loud in the silence. He nodded once more, expression unreadable, then turned and walked back inside without another word. The lobby was beautiful, in a haunted kind of way. Faded red carpet stretched across gleaming black and white tile. A chandelier, unlit and tangled in cobwebs, hung above a grand fireplace that hadn't seen flames in decades. There was no receptionist, no guests, just the whisper of a wind that didn't match the trees outside. I found the front desk with a dusty binder placed squarely on top. A note was taped to the cover. For the new concierge. Read carefully. I opened it. Inside were 10 typed rules, the ink faded but still legible. Check-in guests only between 10 p.m. and 12 a.m. Never earlier, never later. Guests do not speak. Do not attempt to engage them in conversation. Room 304 is always occupied. Do not assign it and never open the door. If a guest offers you something, politely decline, no matter what it is. Lights will flicker at 3:03 a.m. Remain behind the front desk. Do not investigate. You may hear music from the ballroom after 2 a.m. Do not enter. The elevator does not work. If it opens on its own, do not step inside. The bellhop knows the guests. Follow his lead without question. Guests will check out on their own. Do not assist. Leave the front desk before sunrise. Lock the lobby behind you. Never look back. I stared at the list for a long time, unsure whether it was a joke or some elaborate hazing ritual, but the longer I stood there, the more the silence pressed in. The chandelier creaked faintly above me. Somewhere deep in the walls, a low groan, like settling wood or something waking up, echoed through the floorboards. It felt like the hotel was holding its breath. That night, I unpacked in room 201. The bed was surprisingly clean. The sheets, fresh. A pitcher of water sat on the nightstand beside a candle that lit itself the moment I stepped inside. I didn't sleep. At 9:57 p.m., I made my way to the front desk. At 10:01, the front doors opened on their own. One by one, guests began to arrive, dressed in dated evening wear, their footsteps eerily silent, their eyes clouded with something too deep to understand. They said nothing. I assigned rooms by instinct, avoiding 304. The bellhop appeared beside me at some point. I never saw him enter. He took their bags without speaking. disappearing with each guest into the elevator that, as far as I knew, wasn't supposed to work. When the last guest arrived at exactly 11:59, the doors closed on their own, and I was alone again. I looked down at the rule book, my hands trembling slightly. This wasn't a hotel for people. This was something else, and I had just become its caretaker. The second night should have felt easier. I know the drill now. Check in the guests between 10 and midnight. Stay quiet. Don't ask questions. Don't open the elevator. Don't look inside room 304. And for God's sake, leave before the sun. Simple, really. But rules feel different after you've watched the impossible walk through a set of rotted double doors. I sat behind the front desk that second night, staring at the key cabinet. Room numbers arranged in neat little rows. All the keys were there, except the ones I'd handed out last night. They were still missing, and I hadn't seen a single guest return them. Not that I'd seen them leave either. At 10 p.m. on the dot, the lobby clock chimed once, a low, metallic thud that echoed far longer than it should have. The bellhop appeared again, as if conjured by the sound. No footsteps, just presence. He didn't look at me, just stood silently to the side of the front desk, waiting. At 10:03, the first guest arrived. She glided across the tiles in a floor-length black dress, her veil sheer and soaked with something that might have been river water. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. Her skin had a faint bluish tinge, and when I handed her the key to room 207, her fingers were ice cold. She didn't thank me, just turned away, the bellhop already waiting at her side, carrying a suitcase I hadn't seen her bring in. By 10:30, more guests followed. A man in a pinstriped suit, dry rot spreading from his sleeves. 2 children with pale eyes and matching satchels, holding hands like porcelain dolls. Each one arrived without sound. Each one received a room key, and each one stared at me just a second too long, like they recognized me. At 11:41, the last guest arrived, a tall man in a beige trench coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His face was obscured in shadow no matter where he stood. When I handed him the key to room 209, his hand brushed mine. It felt like static. Not electricity, just static, like brushing against something that shouldn't be there. He paused before walking away, then did something none of the others had done. He placed something on the desk, a small, carved wooden box. I froze. Rule 4. If a guest offers you something, politely decline, no matter what it is. But he hadn't offered it, had he? He just left it. I looked at the box. It was smooth and dark, the wood old and polished like a family heirloom. No lock, no visible lid seam, just one faint engraving on the top, an open eye with a slit pupil. It called to me. I couldn't explain it. It pulsed faintly when I stared at it too long, as though it were breathing. The bellhop was suddenly there beside me again. No sound, no warning. He looked down at the box, then back at me. Then, without a word, he picked it up and walked away. My hands were shaking. My breath felt thin. I had followed the rule, but only just, and something about that felt like a test. After midnight, the doors didn't open again. No more guests, just silence and the low ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. At 2:06 a.m., I heard it. Music. Faint, distant, coming from somewhere down the East Wing hallway. A waltz. Soft strings and brass instruments playing a slow, hypnotic tune. Rule 6. You may hear music from the ballroom after 2 a.m. Do not enter. I stayed put, but my eyes kept drifting to the hallway. Something about the melody tugged at memory. It felt like a song I'd heard before, though I knew I hadn't. By 3 a.m., the music stopped. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice, then again at exactly 3:03 a.m. My heart pounded in my chest as the room dimmed to black for a full second. Rule 5. Remain behind the front desk. Do not investigate. I clutched the counter edge and kept still. I don't know why, but I had the sense that something was moving out there in the dark, just outside the edge of the flickering chandeliers. When the lights returned, everything was still. But the grandfather clock was ticking backward. I didn't wait for sunrise. I locked the front door and walked out just as the sky began to lighten. The air outside felt wrong, like the world had tilted a few degrees off normal. When I reached the staff apartment, a note was waiting on the kitchenette table, typed, like the rule sheet. It read, "Very good. You followed the rules." There was no signature, only a second line, added beneath in faint red ink. "Next time, do not hesitate." I didn't want to come back. After the box, the music, the note on my kitchen table. But when I woke up that third evening, I wasn't in my apartment. I was already in the hotel lobby chair, fully dressed, keys in my pocket. The lobby was dark, lit only by the flicker of candlelight along the walls. The chandelier above me, usually dead and draped in cobwebs, was glowing with a faint amber pulse. And in front of me, resting on the counter, was the rule book. Open to page 1. Only this time, there were 11 rules. The new one was at the bottom, typed in a cleaner, newer font. Rule 11. Do not fall asleep inside the hotel. If you do, you will wake up in a different place than where you closed your eyes. My throat went dry. I didn't remember entering the building. Hell, I didn't remember leaving it the night before. I scanned the lobby for the bellhop. Nothing. The desk was empty. The front doors were closed but not locked. A thin fog pressed against the glass from outside as if trying to get in. I checked the clock. 9:41 p.m. Still time. Still a chance to pretend this was all a dream I hadn't fully woken up from. But then I saw it. On the key wall. Room 304 was missing its key. I froze. 304 was the one room I was never supposed to assign, never supposed to enter. But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. My hands started shaking. Just as I reached for the drawer to check the room registry, the lobby doors opened with a long, dry creak. A man stepped in, middle-aged, gray suit, crimson tie, deep-set eyes and skin like parchment. He looked more real than the others, less hazy, more present. He didn't look at me, just walked up to the counter and placed a key gently on the desk. Room 304. "I won't be needing this anymore," he said softly. His voice had an echo, like it wasn't coming from his mouth but from somewhere deeper. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My voice had dried up in my throat. The bellhop appeared silently behind him, collected the key, and gave me a long, deliberate stare before vanishing again, without the guest. The man remained. "You've been good at following rules," he said, tilting his head. "That's rare." He leaned in, close enough that I could smell old paper and damp earth on his breath. But even the good ones slip eventually. I tried to speak, to ask what he meant, but he was already gone. No sound, no movement. One blink, and the lobby was empty again. I stood there for minutes, maybe longer, heart pounding. I hadn't broken the rule. I was sure of it. I hadn't given anyone 304. Had I? At 10 p.m., the doors opened again. The guests returned, one by one. Silent, expressionless, familiar. except this time they looked at me differently. Longer, hungrier. The woman in the veil tilted her head as she passed me. The children lingered at the desk too long before the bellhop ushered them away. By the time the last guest arrived, a man in a tattered naval coat, water dripping from the hem, I was soaked in sweat. I didn't assign 304 to anyone, but it no longer mattered. Because at 12:03 a.m., after the guests had all vanished into their rooms, the elevator doors opened on their own. They groaned like a throat trying to clear itself. The light inside was sickly yellow, blinking rhythmically. I didn't move. I remembered the rule. Rule 7. The elevator does not work. If it opens on its own, do not step inside. But the thing is, it didn't say anything about what to do if something stepped out. A shape emerged slowly. Humanoid, but wrong, too tall, arms too long, face shrouded in shifting static like a television tuned to dead air. It didn't walk. It glided out of the elevator, turned slowly toward the front desk, and raised one long, spindly finger. It pointed at me. My blood turned to ice. Then it slowly turned its hand, pointing behind me. I turned instinctively. Room 304's key had reappeared on the wall, dripping, burning slightly at the edges. I didn't wait. I locked the desk. I bolted from the lobby. I didn't care about the sunrise or the paycheck or the rules anymore. But when I reached the door to the outside, it wouldn't open, no matter how hard I pulled. A new note had been taped to the glass. Guests are not the only ones bound by the contract. I don't know how long I stood there staring at that note on the door. Guests are not the only ones bound by the contract. My breath fogged the glass, and behind it, the forest outside seemed to pulse with something. Not wind, not movement, just presence. I didn't sign a contract, not officially, not on paper, but maybe it didn't matter, because I'd stayed. I'd taken the key, followed the rules, slept in the room, served the guests. Maybe that was the contract. When I finally turned around, the lobby had changed. The chandelier no longer hung above me. It had fallen, smashed across the marble in a crater of shattered glass and twisted brass, though I hadn't heard it fall. Cobwebs stretched like veins across the ceiling. The grandfather clock was gone. Just a void in the wall where it used to tick like a heart. The room felt wider, deeper, as if the hotel had expanded behind my back when I wasn't looking. A low hum filled the air, like a tuning fork pressed against my bones. I stepped back toward the desk and saw something new. A guest book, thick leather, yellowed pages, resting exactly where the rule binder had been. My name was already written in it. Not just once, every page, hundreds of times. Daniel Mercer, Daniel Mercer, Daniel Mercer, over and over. Some written in ink, some in pencil, some in something I refused to believe was blood. I tore the book closed and shoved it off the desk. It didn't make a sound when it hit the floor. That's when the phone rang. An old rotary handset behind the desk I hadn't noticed before. It rang once, then again, 3 times. I didn't want to answer, but I did, because terror has a strange way of overriding reason. "Front desk," I said, my voice trembling. There was no voice on the other end, just breathing. Then a faint whisper. "You've seen him now." Click. The line went dead. The air grew heavier, thicker. It felt like the walls were pressing in. I turned toward the hallway, and I swear the doors to each guest room had shifted. They weren't numbered anymore, just scratched symbols, shapes I couldn't decipher, carved deep into the wood. Some of them were bleeding, others were pulsing. I backed away slowly until I bumped into something solid behind me. The bellhop. He stood impossibly still, eyes sunken, face paler than before. His gloved hand pointed toward the elevator. The doors were wide open again. Inside stood the tall, static-faced thing from before. Only now it wasn't faceless. Now it wore my face. Mouth opens in a frozen scream. Its left eye bled something black. Its teeth were too sharp, too numerous. Its skin flickered like VHS distortion. I ran, not toward the front door, not toward the rooms, but down the side corridor into the hallway marked Staff Only, the one I'd never tried before. The moment I crossed the threshold, the hotel changed again. The lights went out. The floor warped beneath me, carpet turned into dirt. The walls became old stone, slick with condensation. Doors appeared on either side, dozens of them rattling in their frames, hinges shrieking like something inside was trying to get out. Behind me, the air split with a long, wet moan. The bellhop was following. I didn't see him, but I knew. I turned a corner, then another. The hallway refused to end. Then, suddenly, a stairwell. Down. It spiraled like a drain, the steps crumbling and uneven, barely lit by a single swinging bulb overhead. I descended. I didn't count how many steps, didn't track how far. All I knew was the air smelled like old breath and copper. At the bottom, I found a door. No knob, no lock. Just a small plaque nailed to the center, 304. And below it, freshly scratched in the wood, "If you enter, you belong to him." The hallway behind me had gone silent. I waited, but nothing followed. For the first time in 3 nights, I was alone. Or so I thought, until I turned and saw the eye. Not drawn, not carved, not symbolic. A real eye, embedded in the wall beside the door, bloodshot, unblinking, watching me. I reached toward it, against every instinct in my body, and the eye blinked. The door groaned, and behind it, something massive breathed in, like it was waking up. I don't know how long I stood in front of that door. Long enough for the eye embedded in the wall to dry and blink again. Long enough for my breath to grow shallow, like the air itself didn't want me there. Room 304 had been the one rule that felt absolute. Never assign it, never open it. And here I was, standing at the bottom of a stairwell that shouldn't exist, in front of a door that had been sealed in legend and ink, and yet still breathed. I stepped back, just one step. The eye widened, and the door smiled, not metaphorically, not poetically. The grain of the wood twisted and split with a sickening creak, revealing rows of narrow, jagged gaps, like teeth. The brass number plate shimmered in the low light, the 3 bending slightly, almost like it was watching me. Behind it, something pressed forward, not knocking, not pounding, just weight, like something massive, ancient, and waiting. I turned. The stairwell behind me was gone. Only a wall remained, flat and smooth, with no seams or trace of the steps that had led me down. The hotel wasn't just closing in, it was folding itself around me. I staggered back to the door, fingers trembling as I fumbled for the key I hadn't realized I was holding. Room 304. The brass tag was ice cold in my hand, but I didn't unlock it. Not yet. Instead, I whispered, "What do you want?" The door shuddered. The wood groaned. And then the whispers began. Not from behind the door, but from the key itself. They slithered into my ear like breathless confessions. You broke the contract. You saw him. You stayed past dawn. You followed, but not perfectly. You must replace what you disturbed. That's when I understood. The hotel wasn't haunted. I was hungry. The guests weren't trapped souls. They were offerings, placeholders, ritual pieces locked in their rooms like stitches over a wound. And I had been feeding it. Every key I handed out, every name I didn't ask for, every silence I respected. I had been playing priest to a place that fed on presence, memory, and fear. Room 304 wasn't a room. It was the room, the mouth, and tonight it was missing someone. I felt it then, like a hook behind my navel pulling forward. The air vibrated. The eye on the wall rolled slightly, now fixed on me. Blood leaked from the tear duct. I couldn't stay. I wouldn't. I turned, pressed my palms flat against the wall where the stairwell had been, and it gave way. No sound, no resistance, just an opening, like a throat relaxing. I stumbled through darkness. For a moment, I felt weightless. Then I was falling, only not downward, sideways, backward, inward, and then I was in the lobby, alone. The chandelier was intact. The key wall is full. The clock was ticking forward like it always had. The rule book was gone. In its place sat the guest ledger, closed. I approached slowly, hesitant. This time, it wasn't my name written on every page. It was his, over and over, in bleeding ink, in burned etching, in claw marks that tore through paper and bone. One word, host. The pen next to it twitched, and above it a note had been left. You made it to the final night. Beneath that, scribbled in frantic red strokes, your room is ready. The front doors creaked open. Daylight poured in, but it wasn't warm. It was cold and pale, like the shine off a morgue slab. I looked outside, and the hotel looked back. Its windows blinked, its doors stretched. The whole building exhaled, fog clouding the lot. I stepped forward anyway. My legs moved on their own. Something had changed. The hotel wasn't keeping me inside anymore. It wanted me to leave, which terrified me more than anything, because if it no longer needed me, that meant it had already replaced me. I walked out of the Van Crest Hotel for the first time in what felt like days, or weeks, maybe longer. The air outside didn't taste right, too metallic, too still. Even the birdsong that used to greet sunrise was missing. Just the faint hum of insects and the wet smell of soil that hadn't seen rain in a while. The parking lot was empty, except for my car, or what I thought was my car. Same make, same color, but the inside was clean, too clean. No receipts, no fast food wrappers, no scent of stale coffee. The glove box was locked. The rearview mirror was missing. I got in anyway. The keys were already in the ignition. I didn't question it. I just drove. Miles passed. Trees turned into telephone poles. The forest thinned. Civilization returned like a trickle. Signs for towns I recognized, gas stations I'd stopped at before, but everything was quiet, not empty, just muted. When I pulled into my apartment complex, a woman was standing by my door. She looked familiar, sort of. It took me a second to place her. She'd been a guest, one of the early ones, the woman in the veil, no longer damp, no longer silent. She smiled when she saw me, not friendly, not warm, just knowing. You left early, she said. I swallowed. What do you mean? Her smile widened. No one leaves the Van Crest, not really. Before I could answer, she turned and walked away, vanishing around the corner with the soft sound of heels on pavement. I stepped into my apartment, or what was supposed to be my apartment. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. The air was too cold. The lights flickered when I turned them on, even the ones that hadn't flickered before. And on the kitchen table, exactly where the note had once been, was a new object, a room key. Brass, heavy. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to, because I already knew what it meant. The hotel wasn't a place. It was a system, a ritual. It pulled you in, not with chains or screams, but with silence, with rules, with the illusion of order. And once you played along, once you understood, you were marked. I opened the fridge. There was no food, only a folded napkin, a hotel napkin, imprinted with the Van Crest's crest, the one I'd never seen before but somehow recognized. It had an eye, not stylized, not cute, a perfect replica of the one in the stairwell wall. It blinked. I threw it away. That night, I tried to sleep. I didn't dream, but I heard footsteps down the hallway outside, a bell chime at 3:03 a.m., the faint sound of ballroom music bleeding through the ceiling. The next morning, I found a business card slid under my door. Von Crest Hotel, now hiring night concierge. On the back, handwritten in red ink, "You're not done yet." For a week, I didn't leave my apartment, didn't answer the door, turned off the lights, threw the key out the window. The next morning, it was back on the table, polished, waiting. I tried to convince myself it was in my head, some residual psychosis, a trauma response, until I saw the obituary. A local man was found dead in his apartment. My apartment, my name, Daniel Mercer. Heart failure, the article said. No signs of struggle, no foul play suspected. A neighbor reported strange music. That was the moment something inside me cracked. I'm not sure what I am now. I still breathe, still thinking. I still bleed, I think. But when I look in the mirror, my reflection lags behind. And some nights, most nights, I feel the weight of a bellhop's hand on my shoulder. Not pressing, not threatening, just a reminder. There's always a vacancy. There's always a guest to check in. And someone has to follow the rules. So I do what I'm told now. I still wake in my apartment sometimes, but other times, I'm behind the desk, smiling, nodding, handing out keys, avoiding 304. But every so often, I catch a guest who hesitates, who reaches for the wrong door, who asks a question, who forgets to leave before dawn. And when that happens, the elevator opens, the bellhop appears, and a new key is added to the wall. The hotel remembers. It always does. And I've learned the truth. You don't work at the Van Crest Hotel. You serve it. Forever.